Good morning and welcome back to the second hour of LoveBabz, LoveTalk. I'm Babz Rawls-Ivy. I'm delighted to have Nick Kantor. Hey, Program Director of Desegregate, Connecticut. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me, Babs.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. All right. So everybody's up in, thank you. Thank you. Everybody's up in arms about the governor vetoing this particular bill. Why are people so mad, Nick? What's happening?
Yeah, so I'm sure most people are seeing at this point, but the governor vetoed the big housing bill. People have been calling it HB 5002. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the disappointment really stems from the fact that the governor's team was involved at all the steps along the way. Part of figuring out what bill was actually going to get to the floor, part of all the conversations. This was a multi-year effort from advocates and legislators and reps and people at local levels and regular folks just chiming in as well. And then to get to the 1 yard line and have the veto, I think people are we're just disappointed. I think that's the best word I have for it. Really surprised.
So, what was the role that y'all played in this, Desegregate Connecticut? What is your interest in this?
Yeah, so Desegregate Connecticut's a pro-homes coalition. We're a program of the Regional Plan Association, and really what we're trying to do in Connecticut is to create a more prosperous, equitable, and sustainable Connecticut through land use reforms. So a big piece of this bill had some legislation that we've been working on for a number of years called Work, Live, Ride, which would really help incentivize communities to build around transit. So we're an advocacy group and also a think tank, urban planning research organization as well. So really trying to support good policy and make Connecticut more sustainable and more equitable place. 30% of homeowners, 50% of home renters are cost burdened in Connecticut, and we think that's an intolerable state.
So, did y'all have opportunity to reply or respond to the mayor's veto? Like, what do y'all do in response to this?
Yeah, I mean, besides the usual, press statement, blah, 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 it's really keeping pressure on the governor to have a special session over hopefully sooner in the summer than later, as he said he would. So the good news with this veto is it wasn't a veto and come back next year. It was a veto and I see a path to compromise from the governor's perspective to have a special session for the legislature later this summer. He mentioned September. We're hearing talks. It may be in July. We'll see where the ball falls there. Obviously, we'd rather sooner than later. And so, really, we see our role right now is keeping pressure on, keeping it hot, to say lack of a better word there. Of like, a lot of people were counting on him to sign this. A lot of people are affected by this. Put aside what's out in social media. I don't know anyone who's talked to anyone who said, the cost of housing just is really reasonable right now, and I can find an apartment. I can upgrade my home. I can move out of that starter home that I thought I was in and get that extra 2 bedrooms for a really reasonable price. So that's the facts that everyone's facing in this state, and we can either do something about it and address the problems, or we can sit back and sort of say, well, this isn't exactly perfect, and continue to work. And as you know, there's no perfection when it comes to this stuff. So I think a lot of frustration was people seeing that there was a chance to actually get on the field and let policy start to play out, figure out what's working, what's not working, evolve that over time, instead of rolling into the summer of, okay, now the legislature needs to figure out what's this new bill going to look like.
So, when you say pressure, Nick, are you talking to the legislative bodies? Like, are you talking to reps and senators?
Yep.
Like, are you calling them? Like, what are you doing?
Reps and senators for sure. The governor's office, media has been a big help here. Keeping, there's a lot of states out there as well who are doing great work and reminding Governor Lamont of other states that have done some bold choices and actually trying to address the housing crisis or the housing shortage and the climate crisis. And so he's aware that people are watching. I mean, on top of this, Desegregate Connecticut was selected to host YIMBY Town in New Haven in September, which we're really excited about. It's a national pro homes.
Does that mean yes in my backyard?
Yep. That's the conference. It's been going about 10 years. It started really grassroots and still is really grassroots, but advocates from around the country and internationally the media, national press, organizers, policymakers, electeds from around the country will be coming to New Haven in September 14th to 16th. And so we're just reminding the governor that the whole world's watching here, and we hope that we have something to celebrate at this conference and not something to be sort of really sad about.
Hmm. And so the housing crises, renters and buyers, it's not limited to the cities. Like what is a town like Preston or Guilford? Why do they care about this?
I mean, I would say almost everyone's dealing with a housing shortage in one way or another. You know, we don't want to describe it as just a city thing or a suburb or the more rural areas. It's across the board because it's everything trickles on itself. So what I mean by that is, for example, people tend to sprawl and find cheaper land when it's so hard to build with, let's say, within cities. And that's why we got most of the environmental groups on board with Work, Live, Ride and parts of this legislation this year because they see it as an anti-sprawl bill. Where look, we want to reserve or preserve the rural parts of the state that are there. That's good for the environment. That's good for everyone. We want to build where it makes sense, and we really think that's around transit. So whether you have train stations, bus, rapid bus, things like that, we think that's where it makes the most sense to build, and that's really what we want to encourage. So I think everyone cares for different reasons. And look, some of them are good faith and some of them are bad faith, as we know. Like, there's a lot of undertones that come with this, and it's no surprise that Connecticut's, tied with Louisiana as the least equitable state in the nation. So,
Oh, see, I didn't know that.
I'm happy to send you that article. It came out a couple weeks ago. I think I forgot. I think the Hour posted it as well.
Yikes.
Yeah. Um,
That's that's not a good look.
that's not a good look. Homelessness is increasing. Vacancy rate is one of the lowest. We have some of the lowest building in the country, and there's no silver bullet here. Let's be clear, but we think that this bill was really going to start moving the ball forward to lessening the effects of the housing shortage and the climate crisis.
Talk to me about what like how would this bill have done that? Like, because I haven't read the bill, but I know I've talked about this with people. But give me your take on what was in the bill that could have really made this, that makes this such a disappointment in losing out on.
Wait, you haven't read all 93 pages of it yet? No, I kid. Um, what we were most excited for is part of the Work, Live, Ride elements that we're going to prioritize communities that opt in to building in this transit-oriented community way for prioritization for pre-existing state funds. Why we think that's really important is we're in a time of not a lot of fiscal support from DC and elsewhere, so we think the state should be really efficient on where it's spending money and really giving back to the communities who are doing the work, places who are building and who want to build or want to try to do the right thing to increase the housing supply in their towns. Alongside that was some real elements of creating state capacity. By that I mean, look, we don't have counties in Connecticut. We have 169 different municipalities all doing in some way, shape, and form the same thing. It's not really all that efficient, but we were creating an interagency council which was going to have the heads of all the different departments at the state level coming together multiple times a year to try to really streamline the grant making process and government bureaucracy to make it easier for towns. A good example of that was their first project that they were going to work on is a water and sewer survey of the state. Because no one could tell you today what that looks like across the state. There's 3 or 4 different state agencies that are involved in it, and they are not necessarily always talking to each other. So we just wanted to start to break down those silos a bit to be more efficient. And when we see when states can be more efficient, it's cheaper, it's faster, people are less annoyed by it. Because think about it, you're a town planner somewhere and you're trying to do the right thing, but you have 3 different grant applications on different timelines, and it's a lot. It's painful and it's inefficient. So we're really excited about really incentivizing existing funding that exists and using it better versus trying to figure out where we can get new funding and more money right now. Especially just given today's climate, right? Like, the practical realities. If we were flush with more money, things I think would be very different. But the practical realities is there's not a lot to go around.
So who in the country is doing it right or close to doing it right or gives you a reason to like, let me look closer at what they're doing.
I mean, there's a lot of cities in some states who are doing it. Austin has been the leader of this for a while. There's a report that came out this week that rents are down 20% in Austin as a result of the increase of housing supply. North Carolina came out with a state, I think it was a statewide parking ban last week. You have Colorado at the front line, Washington as well doing some really great stuff. Texas came out with a really ambitious housing plan as well. You know, a lot of what you would call, well, a lot of red states are doing great work because they see the value of adding homes and adding to the
Mm-hmm.
tax base.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't
You
always think
know,
that.
I live in New Haven, and there's a lot of development going on. There's a lot of um uh apartments going up like everywhere. But they are inaccessible to poor people, you
Yep.
know. And I in it, as a former legislator myself, you know, when people come to develop in your city, if they come meeting incentives, that's probably not what you want. So people come and they build on existing land that didn't have anything on it. So they're
Mm-hmm.
not tearing stuff down and displacing people. And that seems to be what's happening. So we have so many luxury apartments. And don't get me wrong, our housing authority is the leader in creating affordable housing, mixed use
Yeah,
things,
New Haven's on the
and
forefront of a
all of
lot of
that.
things.
But how do we know when we're doing it right? Like, is the indicator the um lower rents and more apartments? Like, what is the win?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a number of things you can point to for a win. To address the first part of your question, though, a little bit is, yeah, a lot of what's being built is market rate housing. There are studies that do show, though, that market rate housing does trickle down to make rents more affordable elsewhere in the city or the community. That's because people move out and up, and that creates capacity at the lower medium parts of the market. It's also not to look a way of saying that we probably need some form of inclusionary zoning within the regulations, so allow or saying X number of units need to be affordable by the state standards. Part of Work Live Right had that for about, I think it was 10% for an active market, which was a modest thing to do or a reasonable thing to do. You also want to be careful about inclusionary zoning because that can also be used as a way to make development too expensive and thus build absolutely nothing. So it's a double-edged fine line there. And then I think, success for me is people feeling that they have more money in their pocket that they can walk around and not feel that stress of the burden. It's real between housing and transit. That's over 50% of most people's incomes going towards that. That doesn't leave a lot to go around. So I want someone who's a renter in New Haven to have choice, right? I think that's also what was a big part behind the just cause eviction element this year. That was
Mm-hmm.
unfortunate that it didn't get over the line. Was home renters should have choice. It should not be life or death to say, hey, Mr. Landlord, I don't even like that word. Please fix the water situation in my apartment because it's leaking everywhere. First, when people don't feel that they have a choice to say, I'm out, I'm gonna go to that other apartment building down the block and it's gonna be at about the same price and like, moving's a pain in the butt, but besides that, like my life's not gonna be too upended. They feel more empowered. But I think right now we're in a situation, I just learned that Bridgeport has 1% vacancy in the city. That means people don't really have a lot of opportunity to say the
Mm.
power dynamics are all upside down. And it's just really unfortunate where you're now saying, well, I can't move to another city, let's say to get that next job, where it's like, no, I can't because I can't find housing in that new city and I was going to be paid more, but cost of living is exponentially higher, and thus I'm just going to stay where I am today. Mobility around the country is tanking. As a result, I think people are just finding it less fulfilling and
Mm.
also just like scary too, frankly. I don't know about you, but like when the mortgage payment comes and it's like, oh man, okay, here we go again. People are always worried about the roof over their head, and you think we can get to a place where there's ample supply that people can feel comfortable, or not. And I'm talking about across the whole spectrum. What's leading today in the shortage is leading to increased homelessness that's happening around the state. It's up 13% year over year, and that number is only going to go up.
Mm. I
You
just bought a
know?
house with my dear friend, and we spent maybe about a year looking at property, and the housing stock is just so terrible.
Yeah,
Because so many slumlords, when they're ready to give up a property because they done dragged it and they don't want to put any more money into it, they put it
right.
up. And so we go see it, and it's like, and people are living in it, and you're like, holy cow! Like,
Yeah,
how is this even humane? Like, how?
it's. I think you hit it right on that nail on the head there, Babs. Like, I think the most important thing to do right now is to continue to personalize the housing shortage. This is not some ethereal goal to bring in people from everywhere else, although we have no problem with migration into the state. These are our neighbors. These are people who are in your community today. These are
Mhm.
people who you called essential workers during a pandemic, but are not essential enough to live in your community. And we at Desegregate and the RPA fundamentally have a problem with that. And not everyone wants to. Not every teacher wants to live in the town that they teach in. My wife's a teacher. She doesn't want to live in the town that she teaches, and I totally get that. But there are people who do. And again, it's not that everyone should have or get by right, 20,000 square feet mansion. It's reasonable home that people can be proud of. And Connecticut, certainly, probably no surprise for you after looking at so many homes. In New Haven and Bridgeport are on the top 10 list of oldest housing inventory in the country.
Yeah.
So, like, that is an added problem, is that our homes are so old. Even if we build new ones, the old ones need to be renovated, and that has to come from somewhere. So in a lot of ways, this is a pro-growth, pro-opportunity moment. Someone wrote an op-ed over the weekend that said the opposition is anti-growth and anti-opportunity, and that really resonated with me. It was in the Connecticut Mirror. And I think pro-opportunity, pro-family, like, that's really what we're trying to do. Who doesn't want to have their grandkids living, in the same town as them if they could? Some may
Mhm.
not, don't get me wrong. Some people may not want their grandkids living nearby or their kids. I get that. But I've yet to hear someone saying, little Johnny came home from college and is able to rent an apartment nearby so we can still have family dinner, and he's working at a good job, a town away. It's, oh man, little Timmy can't find, or pick whatever name you want to use, can't find housing. So they're living with three friends in pick random town X because that's where they found it.
Mm.
That
Mm.
forces people to drive more. That forces people to do that. Everyone in Connecticut's annoyed about the traffic, but we've set up the system where people need to drive more
Yeah.
because we're forcing people to live away from where they work and where their family is, and we're keeping on creating the problems that we're so annoyed with.
I do think a lot about because I often hear this young people who graduate from college here, they don't want to stay here because the housing and opportunity. Is that true? Is that a real
Absolutely. Yeah, Connecticut Mirror did a whole feature last week or the week before interviewing a bunch of Gen Z folks just leaving college, and they're like, I'd like to stay. I actually got a job, but I can't afford the rent. And I hear it often. We have a lot of interns at Desegregate Connecticut, and I hear it often, college level interns and grad interns. I hear it often from folks being like, I don't know what I'm going to do after college. I can't stay in the area because I can't afford the rent, or, housing unstable. And so it's really unfortunate that we have really bright people that's coming through the system, and we're basically kicking them out of the state because they can't live here. It's too expensive, and we will face the pain for that. Like, we will have economic implications of that. You're hearing from manufacturers across the state that they can't hire people. There's over, I think, 60 or 70,000 open jobs in the state because it just doesn't work out.
so
And the,
so what why is the organization called Desegregate Connecticut? Like what is the background?
yeah, so Desegregate Connecticut was started, I want to say 5 years ago, by Sarah Bronin, following the George Floyd case, or not case, but tragedy. Really looking at why is Connecticut so segregated? More than 50% of Connecticut's non-white residents live in just 10 of the state's 169 towns. And
Wow.
yeah, and 30 towns in the state are more than 90% white, according to the 2020 census. So there's been a ton of studies just observing this, and at its root, housing's a big part of it. It's not the only cause, right? It's not the only thing, but like housing is a big element of where people can live and who historically have had economic opportunity and have not. And that's why our sort of mission is a more prosperous, equitable, and sustainable Connecticut for all. That we think everyone deserves that opportunity, and we believe we can get there and start making progress towards that.
Mm. And so you spend a lot of time talking to legislators. What what do they say versus what they do? Like, what do they say when you have these conversations?
You know, Politicians are politicians, as you know best. But I think there's a lot of good hearted folks up in Hartford who are trying to do the right thing. I've been really impressed with the majority leaders, both Duff and Rojas, the head of planning and development chairs, Eleni Cavos de Gra and MD Rahman, along with the housing chairs, Antonio Felipe and Martha Marks, are really putting their money where their mouth is and trying to put an ambitious bill out there. They could have easily not put a 93-page bill up and said, no, we're not going to deal with housing. We know there's going to be some pushback, but they really did something, and could have been historic, and I think we'll get there. And I think people see it, right? I mean, the thing that legislators hear often, well, the beauty of what legislators get to hear is they're out in their districts, right? They're talking to their constituents one on one, not through the lens of social media, not through the echo chambers of that, what can be corrosive at time environment, but really talking to people. And what they keep hearing is the cost of living is too much. And so I think that's emboldened them to feel like that's actually who they're trying there to serve
Mm.
and wanting to actually make meaningful progress. Right? You can do vanity things all day. Let's have a housing bill. We'll put some things on paper. We know it won't actually do anything, but like we can say we have a housing bill. That's not what they chose to do. They chose to do something that was, I think, a very good, admirable swing. And we hope to get this over the line later this summer.
So has the governor said what about it that he took issue with?
He
Or
took
what's the
issue.
compromise?
He took issue with mostly three parts of it in his public statement on when he was vetoing. First is the towns take the lead fair share portion of it, which was really at its essence just giving numbers to communities to plan for. Communities saw that as the outrage came around, this is what's required to build. And in reality, the legislation had nothing to do around that. It had no enforcement of that building. It was just more of a planning exercise than a go actually put homes in the ground exercise. I imagine there'll be some tweaking and clarification around that to make it more clear on what that actually is meant to be, so it's in line with what the governor has been saying. The other piece that has been governor talked about was the reduction in parking requirements. And what this means is not developers can't build parking, but rather for units of 24 or less residential, the towns can't require a number of parking. And the studies across the country continue to show that reducing parking requirements or eliminating them in towns actually spurs development, decreases costs. And so we think we're really supportive of that policy. I don't know where that'll end up. I imagine there'll be some compromise there. You can sort of tweak the numbers a little bit and people probably will get happy. And the third piece he was most vocal about was the commercial as a right conversion, which was really if you have some commercial properties, you can convert it into missing middle, which was 9 units or less by right. And by right means just it conforms with your zoning regulations, not requiring a public hearing. I think that's where people get hung up a lot, is when they hear the word as of right, they think zoning's not involved. When in reality, 91% of Connecticut is zoned for as of right. It's just as of right for single family homes, right?
Okay.
So if I have a lot, as long as I build with my town zoning regs, I can build my house, go to the permit counter, get stamped, and I'm ready to rock and roll, right? You don't have public hearings for my home or my single family home. So that it actually adds a lot of cost to development. Some studies show that it's 20 to 30% of additional costs, knowing that there's a public hearing and dealing with all of that. So reducing that burden is only going to increase supply, and that's really what we want to do. So I'm not sure where the governor will land on that, and honestly, I have no idea where the legislators are thinking of what they want to, have as the steel bars versus what are they willing to compromise. I'd love to be a fly on the wall there, but just not. But I'm hopeful that something historic is still going to happen and momentous is going to happen. The legislature, as you're seeing, the reaction is fired up about this, and I think they have every right to be.
Mhm. Well, I would imagine if everybody's been working alongside each other for a period of time, and you just think, oh, here is the touchdown, and then no touchdown.
That's exactly right. I think that's how a lot of people felt. You know, all the papers are reporting the governor's team was involved from the get go here. It did not get to the House floor without his office effectively signing off on the bill, and thus people felt confident or comfortable, like we're going to actually get this win. And then for the change of winds is just, I think people feel, I think there's a level of betrayal. That's a big word, but you can read
That's
it.
what came to my mind.
But that's what I think a lot of
like
people
that.
are feeling is like, man, here we are saying this is a huge issue, worked on this thing for a number of years, and to have it taken away at the last minute,
So they
I
have
think
a
it's
special
frustrating.
session. They have a special session, and the real possibility that it could happen
Yes.
or not.
Yes. I mean, all signs are pointing to yes. I think the governor knows that everyone's watching, both at the state's watching, the citizens of Connecticut are watching, and the country's watching. Like, this is a big deal, and housing and cost of living is a number one voter issue, and we think it's just good policy. Again, 30% of homeowners and 50% of home renters in Connecticut are cost burden. That can't be tolerable. Period.
No, I listen. We are doing this experiment. My girlfriend, I mean, my and she's my sorority sister, and we're friends, and we bought this house, and we are experimenting with mixed intergenerational living. My daughters are
Oh,
on the second
that's
floor.
awesome.
She is on the third floor. I'm on the first floor. Now, this is a one-family house that we're converting into
Yeah,
a three-family house, and it has a commercial space attached to it because it used to be a barber shop.
that's
And so,
awesome.
so our
I
goal
mean,
is to make it an event space for community and
that's
whatever.
wonderful, Bat. That to me is the dream in many ways. I think so many people are feeling the effects of, not having a relative nearby. I mean, I have two little kids, 6 and 8,
Hmm.
two little boys. Like, I feel it all the time. My family's not around here. My wife's family's not around here. Just being like, can you just take the kids for like 2 minutes so I can go to the store or I can like breathe? Like, love them to death. And we don't have that. We talk about this loneliness epidemic in this country and this disconnection. You know, we've done it to ourselves. And now we have a choice to start to change that
Okay.
and move forward.
I the rental situation and the house buying situation, it is so unnerving to people, and it feels very desperate to me.
Absolutely. And it creates health. Like, there's a lot of studies around the trickle on effect of housing insecurity and health and how that impacts kids in the classroom. Imagine you're in the classroom and you're worried about, food on the table. Is mom going to be home tonight because she's working two jobs? And oh, wait, rent's due. And I'm not sure if we got that. Like, that weighs on kids at an early age and impacts them in the classroom. Like, we can either pretend that doesn't exist or we can actually tackle it head on. And our view at Desegregate in the RPA is like, we want to tackle those problems head on. And
Mm,
we see ways to get there.
mm,
And it's just, like you said, it is unnerving and just unfortunate, right?
yeah. So when you
Like,
have this conference next in
in
September,
September, yep.
YIMBY, which I love, yes, in my backyard. I
Yimby
love it.
Town, it's coming. We're so excited for New Haven. You guys are doing a lot of great stuff. It was really a galvanizing moment. Pete Harrison, who's my colleague. He's the Connecticut director of the RPA. Was the program director for Desegregate before me. Won the bid last year. Beat out L.A., Raleigh, Philly, some big cities. Really, as either a galvanizing moment for Connecticut around the pro homes movement and everything that we can do there.
And so I imagine people will come with all kinds of housing that we haven't considered. Like there's this conversation about tiny houses,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a project here called the Rosette Project, where people took their backyard and turned it into a little tiny house compound of sorts. And they didn't just throw up huts. They worked with a company that makes these small houses for a specific purpose of housing people who are homeless.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many barriers to sort of to create this. And I thought we have so many lots that could benefit from a tiny house
Yeah,
situation.
we really strive to be bipartisan or nonpartisan. We have everyone from Governor Kelly Armstrong, who is a Republican governor of North Dakota, who's going to be a keynote, to Daryl Fairweather, who's a pro homes advocate, chief economist for Redfin, to Democrats and Republicans up and down the aisle of different houses across the country coming. Bill McKibben, big environmentalist, is another keynote. And really, the goal here is to bring different solutions. We're definitely going to have a panel or two on the Yigby movement, which is the Yes in God's backyard, which is really great and really inspiring. But when you read these stories of pastors trying to put up some housing on the parking lot at the church, and it's just impossible for them to do it, like that's just really sad.
Yeah, we've had
And
success
unfortunate.
with a lot of churches here putting up housing.
Yeah, some
We've
communities are
had
really great with it.
yeah, we've been good at that, I think.
Yeah, and you have everything from ADUs and smaller slot sizes or home sizes to we really want to bring together. Our goal is really to bring housing, transit, and the climate crisis together with like a lens of equity on top of that. To really, our goal here is all these things are connected. You can't have one without the other. So we really want to talk about the interrelationship between housing and transit and climate and the climate crisis and how that's going to impact Connecticut over time and all of the above, because that's how we really think we get to sustainable solutions, is solving these on a multidisciplinary level.
Yeah.
There'll definitely be panels on homelessness, panels on things like building codes, which sounds super boring, right? Building codes. If we think zoning's boring, wait till you get to building codes. But as you know, building codes have a huge impact on what can be built, how it
They
can be
do.
built,
Yes.
how much it costs to be built. Whether you have one stair or two staircases for small buildings. Connecticut passed a single stair reform last year that's still working its way through, but that could be really instrumental of unlocking smaller developments. Sixplexes, triplexes, things like that. That people are like, oh, that's not that bad. You wonder why you have these larger complexes being built because that's what's easier to build. It pencils out. It you get the funding for it. It's just an easier pathway. But I think we really want to encourage that missing middle sub 10 units because I think that's what people feel more comfortable with. It's how you gradually grow a community without it feeling like something is radically changing.
Well, thank you for your time and conversation, Nick. I hope you come back. Like, feel free
I'd love to.
to come back and follow up after the historical bill comes through.
I would love that, and hopefully we can get you over to Yimby Town as well, Babz. I'll send you
Oh,
some
I'd
more
love
info on
to.
that.
This is
Yeah, we'd love to get you
fascinating
there.
to me.
Yeah,
This is
you'll have a blast.
fascinating. So thank you so much. And I look forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too. Take good care. Thank you, Harry. All right, good people. I'm out, but I'll be back tomorrow. And y'all be good and stay safe out there. Thanks for tuning in.